Welcome back to the trap. Welcome back to the faint sound of my neighbor singing at the top of his lungs. The first book, which I threw into the ocean, is River of Gods by Ian McDonald. That's why I don't have a physical copy. Just kidding, I just gave it back to the bookstore. This book is the main culprit behind why this video has been so long in coming. It ate up a giant chunk of time and energy and enthusiasm to finish. And if you can tell from my demeanor, I don't like it at all. One of the more frustrating books that I have read, and in a way, kind of the most frustrating because I loved it for the first half. I don't recall why, but I do recall really liking it a lot. And then suddenly, around the halfway point, like if you get an experimental flavor of ice cream and it's ecstasy for the first half and then you want to vomit. Most people would just not continue to eat the ice cream, but I happen to have a YouTube channel in which I eat ice cream. An important piece of context here is I am experiencing a little bit of science fiction overload. I've read nothing but science fiction with a smattering of fantasy for over a year. That may be coloring my distaste for the book. It's a cyberpunk epic set in India, in a future India where the country has splintered into a bunch of different mutually hostile nations. And it follows the rise of a hyper-intelligent artificial intelligence that is hunted by not Rick Deckard. And this is transpiring in the midst of civil unrest in one of the states of India. There's some cloak and dagger stuff going on, some political intrigue, and about 15 different characters who all have sex all the time. Ian McDonald lives in Belfast and sets most of his books in developing countries, which is interesting. I did watch an interview on YouTube with McDonald, and he referred to himself as a method actor. He says he does a great deal of in-depth research into the culture and place of the countries in which he sets his books and travels there for some length of time. And it does give it an interesting color. At times it does feel a little chintzy. One of the first scenes of the book is this Deckard character is hunting an AI in some warehouse, and he has a gun that shoots computer programs that manifest as holograms of Hindu gods and goddesses. There's just a bunch of kind of eye-rolly stuff like that. I will say the prose, for at least the first half, felt sharp, it felt alive. There was artistry to it, it felt snappy. It was kind of like a space opera-y rendition of Gibson. The reason I'm not describing more about the plot is that I have forgotten most of it, and also there are just too many plot threads, and there's not a really clear through line. I don't feel much dramatic tension. You don't need dramatic tension if the book is great. Like the next book that I'm going to talk about, which is Ice by Anna Kavan, that one also probably doesn't have a plot. Or if it does have a plot, I would be hard pressed to describe it, and stay tuned for watching me struggle to do so. But something like this, which is a more straightforward, mainstream novel, supposed to be entertainment, really, it does need plot. It's a techno thriller that doesn't thrill, and it just attempts to do too much. There's just too much going on. It's incoherent. The prose, after a while, just feels gimmicky. It just wears thin. It's very late 90s, snappy, electric, fast-moving. It's a little smarmy, and I just lost patience with it around the halfway point. Another thing that I really, really lost patience with, the sex content in it is pervasive. Initially, I thought, like, wow, this is how you do it. It's not, it's not overplayed. It doesn't seem that it's overplayed at first, and it kind of tips the hat that, okay, this is a book by an adult, for an adult. It worked seemingly for a while, and then it just went into hyperspace, just hyperdrive. It was just this omnipresent, imminent quality throughout the entire novel that cheapened everything. And just like with Heinlein, just like with all the other authors where I've complained about this, and I know that I've complained about this a lot, and I wish that that weren't the case because, again, I have to give this proviso. I don't want to give the impression that I'm a prude or that I disapprove of sexual content. Sexual? I don't want to give the impression that I'm not a sexual kind of a being. When it's overstated like this, it cheapens everything and it becomes deeply obnoxious to me. It's like Heinlein, but slightly less predatory, but more pornographic. It's just everywhere. It just insinuates itself into every little nook and cranny of the book. The example that I will give, and this is one of the rare instances where I've actually sworn out loud while reading a book. I was already fed up with it, and then there is a scene towards the end of the book where there's a romantic couple who are fleeing on a train, and the man gets shot, and she discovers this, pulls her hand away, and it's bloody, and she watches him struggle for his life, and it describes him wallowing in a pool of sexual blood. Oh, the blood is sexual. Oh, the sexual blood, of course. Nothing else sexual about the scene, before or after, just you could fuck the blood. I will say, I think it was one of his earlier books. Maybe his later books are different. I'm willing to give him another shot. The next book is Ice by Anna Kavan. And I should know more biographical details about Anna Kavan. The one detail that I know that everybody kind of knows is that she was a severe heroin addict. She's also celebrated in the world of letters. She is considered the world of letters. The world of letters. She is considered one of the best modern, about to say modern modernists. She was one of the finest, most modernist of modernists. Compared often to Franz Kafka, which is very high praise and something that I will echo. First of all, what an incredibly lucky find to find in hard copy in Puerto Vallarta. I'm in Mexico City right now. Thank God I found it, and thank God I read it, and thank God I had done a little bit of like YouTube homework and been a book nerd to know about it in the first place, because what an incredible book and what an incredible masterpiece. It's an experimental piece of high literature that dabbles in various genres, including science fiction, takes place in a Scandinavian country on the eve of nuclear holocaust. There are political tensions globally that have reached a fever pitch, and war is imminent. The world is already pretty depleted of its resources and is experiencing the preliminary stages of an environmental catastrophe in which huge walls of ice are encroaching onto the inhabited, in which humans must flee an encroaching wall of ice. It's about a trio of characters who are never properly named, 2 men and a woman. And the woman is described as an eternal victim who is victimized by a man who captures her and keeps her in a locked, soundproofed room and abuses her horrifically. And the protagonist comes into the scene in pursuit of her, having met her before and become obsessed with her, to try to extricate her from this situation, not out of romantic love, but out of obsession and out of a desire to dominate her and own and control her. The 2 men become embroiled in power plays and political intrigues and competition for control of the woman who despises both of them and is always trying to escape. It's a dark, grim book, and it's also an extremely bizarre and unique book. There's chunks of it that are purely realistic and descriptive, and then they bleed into these surreal, hallucinatory episodes, these like apocalyptic visions of people dying in spectacular ways, these bloodbath battle scenes and visions of people being consumed by ice. It's never explained, and it's never clear if it's hallucination or fantasy, daydream, or if it's really happening. And there are these episodic cycles of this that occur throughout the book where characters will die and then reappear again, and there's no seeming causality. None of the formal structures of the plot or the character development really matter. What matters is the subjective experience of reading it and the questions and the mood states that it plays with. It reminds me a lot of Kobo Abe, Woman in the Dunes. It has that same sense of, like, all the plot, all the setting is kind of window dressing to the internal experience of the characters and the reader. Just what is happening on kind of this level of pure symbol and pure experience. That might be a shitty undergrad lit kind of nutshell for it. That's the closest that I can get to describing it. You can bring all kinds of different interpretations to it, and they all fit and none of them fit. It's its own unique four-dimensional art object that you could probably read a dozen times and get different interpretations of every time. There were parts of it where I thought, clearly this is a metaphor for her own heroin addiction, and then something would transpire that would kind of wipe the slate clean and make me think, oh, well, no, this is clearly, a metaphor for environmental catastrophe, or this is dystopian doomsaying, or it's an allegory about sexual relations between men and women. And all of these are true, and none of these are true. It is truly greater than the sum of its parts. There are also parts of it that I found funny. There is a section that I'm pretty sure is a satire of Slaughterhouse-Five, which kind of took me by surprise, that made me laugh. I don't know if it was intended to be so, but it does play around with science fiction ideas. I'm counting it as science fiction because I would like to give it a fair shot at the top 15, and it is that good that I would contemplate putting it there. And finally, The City and the Stars by Arthur C. Clarke, which was originally a story that I think was called Against the Fall of Night, and was worked up into a novel. It's okay. I like Clarke. I like Clarke as a prose stylist more than Asimov or Heinlein, not quite as much as Bradbury, but he's closer to Bradbury in a lot of ways than he is to the other two. There are moments in this that are quite beautiful. Clarke was capable of penning really gorgeous lyrical snippets of prose, and there are a bunch of those in here. Otherwise, I found it a little bland, a little vanilla, a little predictable, and sort of low stakes feeling. There just wasn't that much in here that I found all that special. The plot is pretty basic. It's a pseudo-dying Earth story set in the far future. The entire human population lives in a mega city that is controlled by computers, and people live in total material abundance. All of their desires are fulfilled, but they cannot leave the city. And a man is born who is an iconoclast free thinker who is driven to escape the city by some unaccounted for instinct. Based on that premise, do you have a notion of how that story might end? That is kind of how it ends. Well, I should say, it's how it should end, because it follows that plot thread all the way up to its logical conclusion, and you can tell. I tried to find the original text of the story online for free, but I couldn't. I'm guessing that the story ends where I think that it ends, the original story, which is around right here. And then there are these other chapters that are bolted onto the end of it that are painfully boring. It's kind of this space opera thing. He just kind of shoves a bunch of stuff. It was fine. It was fine. I think it would be a good book. This is going to sound really snide. I don't mean it to sound that way, but it would be a good book to hand someone like middle school, early high school, maybe who has read a couple of the classic dystopians and likes them. It has kind of a YA feeling to it. I really wish Clarke had focused more on prose than on world building and hard science exposition, which is what he is most remembered for, because there were flashes of real artistry and mastery. There was one paragraph I screenshotted and threw up on the Discord, and I don't often do that. It has to be something really special. Clarke has this really gentle view of the world that I don't necessarily relate to, or of science in the universe, man's place in the universe, and he has this sense of optimism. This very sort of old guard, classic science fiction faith in man's destiny as a star-faring species. And even in sort of dim, grim projections of man's future, which is sort of what this is, that optimism follows through, and it seems that he is unable to indulge in pessimism. Even when he does indulge in pessimism, he has to put the final spin on it that it was all just a bad dream and everything actually is fine. And I don't really resonate with that. But he does have this cosmological, big picture, huge scale sensibility to his work that I do really like. I don't think that this achieves the qualities of 2001 and Childhood's End, especially Childhood's End, which genuinely I find sort of magisterial. Clarke does have beauty in his works, but unfortunately the beautiful parts are second fiddle to the world building and plotting and etc. that I just don't find all that interesting. Here's what I'm reading next. I'm reading The Decay of the Angel by Mishima. I've only read one Mishima book, which is The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea, which I loved, and one of the most bizarre people in history, and one of the best writers I've ever read. This is Litfic. So I need a little bit of a break to reset, and then I have some bangers and halves in science fiction that I have scavenged, and I may do a little haul video. So there is more science fiction to come, but first, baby needs a little break. I'm guessing that the next review video will be not nearly as long in the making, because I'm pretty excited about the books that I have. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it.